This is your year to ring in the deals and ring in the keys to your brand new ride during our Ring in the Savings event at Capital Ford. Like a new 2025 Ford F-250 Super Duty with 0% APR for 60 months. Or a new 2025 Ford Bronco Sport. Just $495 a month lease for 36 months with no money down. This is your year, so drive into 2026 the right way during our Ring in the Savings event at Capital Ford in Santa Fe. This is your year to ring in the deals and ring in the keys to your brand new ride during our Ring in the Savings event at Capital Ford. Like a new 2025 Ford F-250 Super Duty with 0% APR for 60 months. Or a new 2025 Ford Bronco Sport. Just $495 a month lease for 36 months with no money down. This is your year, so drive into 2026 the right way during our Ring in the Savings event at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Hey everybody, good evening. Welcome to another live edition of the Pit Press Live. I'm your host this evening, Erik Moulton, co-owner of the Pit Press, and we've got a special episode podcast live stream for you guys that are going to be tuning in live or maybe listening to the podcast tomorrow morning as you count down the time to tip off with Mountain West play. Grand Canyon visits the Pit tomorrow night, 7 p.m. The game will be streamed on Mountain West Network, and I also think it's going to be on the Altitude too. But before we get into some basketball chalk talk, let me introduce kind of the panel that's been kind enough to join me tonight. A common face and voice that you see on the Pit Press Live, the lawyer of the group, the attorney, and the better half of the Nunez duo, Mr. Nick Nunez. What's up, man? How you doing?
Erik, I appreciate you, man. I'm doing well. Excited to be joined by Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio to break down some GCU hoops. Big one in the Pit tomorrow night. Let's get into it.
Yep, big one indeed, and just stoked to have Brennan Williams back on the live stream and the podcast. Friend of the show, we've talked a few times in the past, I believe, but Brennan Williams at Go Lopes Radio, we've linked his stuff. We shared his Twitter handle on our Twitter account. He covers the GCU Grand Canyon Lopes basketball program pretty extensively. I think he's even media credentialed now, and his podcast is really taking off. So, Brennan, welcome back to the Pit Press, man. How are you feeling?
Guys, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Two things. First, as we just talked about, I am bummed. Was going to be making it out, seeing the Pit in person, and unfortunately, I'd have to cancel the trip. So bummed there. So we'll see you guys next year, I promise. And then the second thing is, I know it's tough to call these early in the season, but Mountain West, come on, this thing's got to be on linear. Listen, Mountain West Network, it's fine. This one should be on linear, in my opinion. But whatever. So be it. We'll take it, but excited for a really big matchup between the Lopes and the Lobos.
Dude, what a bummer. You'll have to make that trip to Albuquerque next season. We'll gladly host you, show you around, spend a few days in Albuquerque, and the Pit is definitely one of those experiences. And I think we would like to get out to Phoenix and check out a game there on campus at GCU.
Gotta come do it.
Yep. I know we had Steve Ivey on from Colorado State. He covers Steve. He made the
Yep.
trip out to Phoenix, and he was raving about it. And he's like, "There's only 7 or 8 thousand people there, but it gets crazy loud, and the environment is just really cool. The student section, they get really involved in the game too." So, but let's get into kind of talking about the game, talking about the Lopes a little bit. I know Nick has a bunch of questions he wants to kind of get off his chest. There's also a link to Nick's new preview article down in the YouTube description, so make sure you check that out. That's actually live on our website right now at thepitpressnm.com, so go check it out. But Brennan, GCU is coming off a pretty impressive string of wins to start out Mountain West play. Right now they sit at 10-5, 3-1 in the Mountain West, so they are starting to turn some heads, but the game against Boise State, man, I don't think anyone in the league could have saw that one coming. But GCU walks away with the win at Boise State, 75-58. Boise currently sits in the net at number 80. Break down that game for us and for people that weren't able to watch it. How did GCU look?
Yeah, so I think kind of starting a little bit before that, much like this whole season for the Lopes, right? They go to Wyoming before Christmas. They get this kind of big win. They go to the Laradice, as obviously it's been termed, and it's like, okay, this team's turning a corner. They play a bad IU Indy team. It was a little sloppy. So be it. They get the win. And then you're looking forward to this Colorado State game. They're dealing with injuries. Colorado State's playing probably their worst ball of the season. I talked with, like you just mentioned, friend of the program, Steve Ivey, and he was just a little down. And, he's like, things haven't been going well. And we thought, okay, this is great. What an opportunity to start 2-0 in the Mountain West. And the thing with Colorado State, they only play them once. So this is kind of the head-to-head tiebreaker if it comes down to it, right? And man, they did what they've done a few times this season. And just when things are looking great, they kind of dropped an egg. And they lost at home to Colorado State. A lot of people were really frustrated. Obviously, it was a tough game. They got completely outplayed. There's a 21-2 run there. And so, yeah, you go into that Boise game, and obviously Boise, I think, also had kind of an up and down season, right? And it was just a weird game. I'll be honest, from my opinion, it was a weird game because, it's the 9 p.m. FS1 game, and you turn it on and you're like, man, there's just not a lot of people there. Like, you're kind of looking around like, is this a bad angle? Is this, shots from before the game, an hour before? Like, where are the people at? They didn't have a ton of fans there. There wasn't a lot of noise. The tip didn't happen until 9. I think it was like 17 or 18 Mountain Time. One of those weird games. And you could tell from the get-go, I think GCU started out 8-0 or 10-0 to start the game. And yeah, the Lopes, they were absolutely locked in. By far their best performance of the season. And when the team got back, I was talking with them at the game on Saturday, the San Jose State game. I was talking with some of the staff, and they were like, man, it was so weird. Like, we were so locked in all week. They're like, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was, we needed to go get one. We need to prove it in the Mountain West sort of thing. They didn't really have an explanation for it, but they said, we felt so good going in. We were locked in. It was kind of us against the world. And I'll be honest, from my perspective, it did feel like maybe the Lopes were being disrespected a little bit. Like, the Boise State fans didn't show out. I thought, Coach Leon Rice made some interesting decisions by not starting Drew Fielder. So be it. His replacement gave up the first 8 points of the game. So that felt a little weird. Maybe like he thought he could try to punish a player and still maybe get away with it and get the win sort of thing. I don't know. That's just a thought there. And then, yeah, the play from Boise State was pretty lackadaisical. So again, Boise made a pretty good run there in the second half. Lopes held them off and then, answered with a massive run to obviously kind of blow it open. But yeah, it was just one of those games, like late night Mountain West. We've seen it already, a few weeks in here. It gets weird. And it was definitely one of those ones. And I think it, like you said, put a lot of Mountain West people on notice. GCU, this new guy, kind of, who are they? Maybe they didn't do good in non-con. And all of a sudden, I feel like they're kind of, people are paying a little more closer attention to them. And, there's still, the final thing I think to say of that is, this is how it works in the Mountain West, right? You haven't played any of the top 3 teams. And so they're going to have something, right? Until you play the Utah State, the Lobos, and they haven't played Nevada, and they haven't played San Diego State. So we'll see, they've got the 3 of those teams coming up here. So we'll see how it goes. But Yeah, that was an awesome game and it felt like a real galvanizing moment for that group. And they looked fantastic, and it's hopefully something they can now build on and not have any steps backwards.
Well, I think kind of as the Mountain West season starts to unfold, I think GCU is kind of jumping right into the gauntlet, right? They play UNM tomorrow at the Pit. Then they host Utah State, who now sits 20 in KenPom and 13 in the net nationally.
Crazy.
And then they're back at home against San Diego State. So you're going to find out real fast how competitive these guys are going to be. And it's just a fun league. I think just all around the rivalries that currently exist, we've kind of used to it. And now you're going to get a good taste of it. And there's good basketball all around. But Nick, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, we're speaking with Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio. Brennan, GCU 10-5 on the season, 3-1 in conference play. What stands out to me is their size, physicality, and their defense. I think defensive adjusted efficiency in KenPom, I think they're right around 29. And
hanging out with the Lobos.
Their starting lineup is 4 guys, 6'6" and over, 7'1" F.A. Demerol. Just tell us a little bit about the size, physicality, and defense for GCU.
Yeah, so it's funny because it's been an Achilles heel, strangely enough, at times. And now we've seen it start to become a real asset for them, their size and physicality. They go to St. Louis, and, oh, man, Bryce absolutely ripped them a new one on the radio, wherever he could. And there was a few other letdowns, Youngstown State. And in those games, GCU is kind of just getting pushed around. Now, a big part of that is F.A. Demerol, who you mentioned, GCU center, listed at 7'1". He's big and he's super fluid. He comes over from Turkey, so kind of plays that European style. And there were just some games where, again, he's just a 19-year-old, first time playing in college, playing in the States, adjusting to new life. And a big part of it was kind of him getting pushed around a little bit. And it was on a game-by-game basis. We talked about how Boise State, they just had it. Some of those games, they didn't have it. And so early on, Bryce talked about the little things like F.A. going to post up, and he's supposed to be on the block, and all of a sudden he's 16 feet from the basket. And it's like, well, wait, how did you get put? It's like, you're just getting pushed. And so there was a little bit of adjustment. A lot of that happened more in the non-con, but now we've seen them really turn a little bit of a corner here. F.A., he's had a few good games. He was fantastic against San Jose State. They were able to just go to him. And it wasn't crazy sets. It wasn't anything this or that. It was just, hey, F.A., San Jose State's down a ton of guys. They don't have size anyways. Get your butt down on the block. We're going to get you the ball and finish it with authority. He's starting to trend a little bit and having some really good moments. So I love what he brings to the table. And, he's going to be someone who's going to evolve throughout even just this season, which I think gets you kind of excited if you're a Lopes fan. I don't know where we're at. We saw F.A. 1.0. Maybe we're in this 2.0 version right now. We'll see where he can get. Maybe come March, but he's been really impressive. And then the next guy is Nana Owusu-Inane. And I put out a thread the other day of just some of his play. I believe I have to check Evan Meyer again. He's rated as the best defensive player in the conference. And, I talk about how unique that is because he's this 6'8" tweener forward. And usually when you talk about the great defenders, and I wrote about this as well a little bit, it's, you get two guys. Think of like Magoon Guath, right, at San Diego State. Yeah, he's kind of a forward and he does a little bit on the perimeter, but right, he's blocking shots. He's doing all sorts of stuff. He's doing his Anthony Davis, very, very light impersonation, right? Just arms everywhere, right? So those guys usually get a lot of attention. Or you get kind of those tougher guards, the slap the ground guys that are picking you up. They want to be physical. Those are the two guys that usually get a lot of attention on the defensive side of the ball. Nana is just insane. I posted one play from Boise where, he's on the other side of the court. He comes over and he helps on Drew Fielder, Boise's best player, doesn't foul. And because he contests without fouling, he actually falls down and falls under the basket. And he's not even down there for a millisecond. He pops right back up. GCU doesn't get the rebound and the ball kind of just squirts out. There's a Boise State guy close, and he actually goes and picks it up. It was insane. He's just right there. He does the little things, and so he really sets the tone. And I think part of it's just because he's a tweener. Like, he's never had that kind of place, I think, as this like 6'8" forward who he can shoot it a little bit, but, he's not going to spend a ton of time on the perimeter, but he's not this guy who just wants the ball, back to the basket. And so he's had to find his lane. And I think we see that in the way he plays. And then that's translated obviously up and down the lineup, but that's how Bryce Drew wants to play. As I've mentioned this before, they don't have a guy sitting in the paint that's going to just block a ton of shots. They want to guard really tough on the perimeter. They were doing a very, very poor job of it at the start of the season. They're coming along. They've made serious strides. I think they were outside of 100 in defensive KenPom efficiency early in the season, now down to around 28. And it's quite the story. And they're trending really well on that end. But, it's still a little touch and go. So we'll see. They did a fine job against San Jose State. They got the job done. But we'll see. This will be, like you guys said, this will be a really good test because you got to pass this test. And if you don't, guess what? You don't get a ton of time to, kind of sulk in the corner. You got to get back and go play an AP poll ranked team at home. So this will be a fascinating week of basketball, I think, for the Lopes.
Brennan, next question for you. GCU's 3-point shooting has really picked up the last couple games. One guy, Dusty Stromer, the Gonzaga transfer, was 4 of 6 against San Jose State. Yeah. And I think you said on your podcast earlier today, which is available on Go Lopes Radio, check it out, but that he's been 46% since conference play started at Wyoming. So just tell us how GCU's 3-point shooting has improved the last few games.
Yeah. So this is another thing where, we don't have to really beat around the bush. A few weeks into the season, it was kind of an unmitigated disaster shooting the ball. Just everybody was shooting it poor. And I actually posted something in an article as well. Guys, they're shooting last year or their previous spot. So guys that have been on GCU for 2 years. And then they're shooting when they got to GCU. And there was regression across the board for everybody except for Caleb Shaw, and who's been a really good 3-point shooter when he's been a Lope. But it was just, I don't know, man. Is it the basketball? Is it the rims? Is there a fan going on in GCU Arena? I don't know what the heck was going on here. Everybody was shooting bad. Things, like you said, Nick, have slowly started to pick up. Dusty's been a big part of that. And I don't know what it is. We asked him post game after San Jose State. He said, listen, it's just kind of life. It's just rhythm. It's just keep putting shots up and keep giving yourself opportunities. I asked Bryce about it too, who I think has an interesting maybe way to look at it as a former player. Right. And he said it's the same thing. It's rhythm. It's encouraging. It's getting him to continue to take those shots. And yeah, he's 46% since Wyoming. That does include the IU Indy game, which is kind of sandwiched in there, part of conference play. So we included that in there. But he's trending a little bit now. We did talk about this, but he had a pretty nasty ankle sprain. Nana did as well against San Jose State, kind of the Mountain West grind, catching up to him, I think, a little bit. Nana came back in and looked fine, and I thought Nana's was worse, but Dusty really was pretty shaken up, did not come back in the game, and was hobbling after. Bryce said everything seems to be a go with them. We'll see how, maybe if there's anything's affected, maybe they get the blood flowing and everything is good there, but definitely something to monitor there, which is really disappointing because, he's shooting the ball well and kind of starting to come into his own. Dusty is, and he has the tough ankle sprain. So we'll see how that looks Tuesday. Maybe it loosens up with the altitude. I don't know what the science says about that, but yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye on it. But he's shooting it well. Other guys, I think there's still room to improve. Like a Mekhi Williams, he's been super confident. He was 45 plus, I think, his freshman year at University of Texas Arlington. He's shot the ball okay from 3 since he's come to GCU. Not great. I think there's room to improve there. Henley has maybe taken some bad shots, not necessarily a 3-point shooter. I think he's down low 20s. And then Caleb Shaw is kind of the other guy who, I'm at the point where I'm like, man, maybe he needs to be taking 6-7 a game. I don't know at this point. He's a really good shooter. So definitely a guy for Lobos fans to keep their eyes on. But the shooting's trending. It's a lot better. I think at one point they were, 320th in the country a month and a half into the season, and it's gotten a little bit better. So hopefully that continues here. But, it's no joke. You go up and down. I was talking on my podcast, Dick, you probably heard it. You pull up that New Mexico KenPom profile. There's a lot of green on there. I mean, it's and it's not usually you see teams and it's they're green, they're good at one thing or they specialize in one thing. It's there's just a lot of green up and down that. So I think this is going to be a really interesting test. And something I've been really impressed with, to be honest, when you look at Coach Olin and what he's been able to do kind of on the fly with new staff, new players, and excited to see it kind of in real time and how it gets tested out. Two teams, I think, colliding at such a fascinating time in this season.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Brennan. I think they are coming together very nicely. Very calculated in how Olin coaches his team, and I think he puts the right guys in. I think he likes the tempo. I think he likes these guys shooting the ball early in the shot clock, those high percentage shots. But You did talk about the backcourt a little bit in Jaden Henley and Makai Williams. Makai Williams had a really good game against Boise State. He had 16 points. He kind of carried them there in the second half when Boise State was making that run. I think they were down by 18 at one point, and I think they cut the lead to 4 or 6 there late in the second half. And then GCU just went on their own 8-0 run, and a lot of that was led by Makai Williams, who at the beginning of the season didn't see a ton of minutes, but now he's kind of playing second fiddle to Jaden Henley, who's averaging right around 17 points per game, which is 4th in the Mountain West. So between those two guards, I mean, how would you say that the guard play has kind of really evolved from the non-con to now in conference play? Because that's when you want your guys kind of hitting a stride.
Yeah, it's been, kind of different guys, different nights for this group. And Henley, obviously, he's a guy at UNLV kind of down the stretch last season, those last few games, and he's given the car keys, kind of showed the ability, had spurts, maybe wasn't, super efficient, but like, wow, yeah, this guy, he can score if he needs to. And he's been another guy who he's had really impressive nights, and there's been some games where he just hasn't had it. And you mentioned Makai Williams. There was a play in the Boise State game where I want to say, Boise had made their run and GCU had maybe scored once or twice. So it was still in that weird zone. I think there was maybe 8 minutes left. GCU's up like 8, and GCU turns it over. And one thing, it's funny, I sent a message in our message board. Makai Williams, I've always said, like, man, this guy can jump. Like, a lot of people don't know that, but he can really jump. And he's only like 6 foot, 6'1". Maybe you give him 6'2", depending on, what shoes he's wearing. And I've seen him, between the legs, 360 in pregame. And I'm like, wow. And he doesn't use it a lot. He's very smart and wise in how he uses it. He's not reckless and just, jumping all over the place. Boise gets a steal. It's a 2-on-1. And you're like, gosh, dang it. Like, GCU had just scored a few times. They had a little bit of momentum to try to kill this run. You cannot have this game linger any longer. This guy, he doesn't pass it on Boise. He goes, and Makai comes out of nowhere, and, he just jumps up and he pins the ball and gets the rebound. And it was just like, whoa, I know it's late. Like, did my mind what the heck just happened there? And was the play of the game, like, without a doubt. Obviously, GCU had a great start, but that was everyone's mind was blown. I think that was such a pivotal moment in the game. Him going up and making a statement like that when Boise could have cut into it a little bit. And yeah, he's coming into his own. St. Louis, I talked about how confident he was in that game. He didn't shoot the ball well at all, but the rest of the Lopes, man, they looked like dazed and confused when they played that game at St. Louis, and they got ran out of the gym. They went on, I think, a 14-0 run to end the game to cut it to like a 16-point game, but it was not a basketball game. Like, they got blown off the floor, and the only guy that looked any sort of confident or wanted the ball in his hand, was aggressive, was Makai Williams. Seen him grow a ton this year, and yeah, he hasn't been scared of the moment. Every time you ask him in a presser, it's really cool because he says the same answer every time. When he's started, when he's come off the bench, when he's played 15 minutes, when he's played 25 minutes, when he's the ball in his hand at the end of the game, like, it's been the same answer. Like, I need to be ready. I've learned this throughout my last 2 years. I've had every possible role you can imagine, and my job is to just be ready, and I'm going to be ready for whatever comes my way. And so he's been really impressive this year. Stock is up on Makai Williams. They have him still coming off the bench, which I think, is an interesting role for him. Like, he can come in and he's super free. There's not a ton of pressure out of the gate to feel like you got to have it as soon as the ball tips up in the air. And it's something that's worked out. So we'll see kind of how that works. But yeah, he's been really, really, kind of dynamic. And yeah, I think there's room to grow with the 3-point shot as well for him. So we'll see how it looks, but he hasn't been scared of any moment, which I think says a lot about him. And we'll see, how that looks tomorrow night in the pit.
And I think some guys feel, it sounds weird, but feel more comfortable coming off the bench. Yeah. There's a little less pressure on them from kind of being in the starting role, and they're just like that burst of energy, sixth man, right? First guy onto the court at the 4-minute or the media timeout. Right? Guys like Tannett could be kind of a spark off the bench. And as of late for the Lobos, I think like Tajavis Miller has been another guy to come off the bench and add some juice and knock down a couple threes. But focusing now, or transitioning our focus now to like the front court with this GCU team and being able to protect the rim, because the Nick's preview that I was able to read before I jumped on was GCU does a pretty good job of protecting the rim. right? Like they guard really well around the basket, but that's somewhere that the Lobos have thrived at in that 2-point field goal conversion. A guy like Tomislav Buljan, who gets to the basket, who rebounds well. He's leading the conference right now with 9.9 rebounds a game. But Owusu Nane, who kind of surprised me as a guy that he's second in the Mountain West in overall rebounds, averaging 9.1. Maybe talk about that matchup a little bit, and then how maybe GCU would plan on defending a guy like Buljan, who I don't think they've played someone like that. I mean, this far into the season, have they?
So, yeah, it's tough because Nana's so interesting, and I'm curious to see what they do end up doing, because Nana sometimes he maybe thrives a little bit more if he can be a little bit of like a free safety or like a middle linebacker, if that makes sense. There's our guy Steve Ivey, and he's just had moments like I mentioned in that Boise game where he was kind of just around and he does everything. And so I don't know who he'll end up on. Obviously, I don't know. It'll be fascinating. But the thing with the rim defense for me with the Lopes and why it's so dynamic is it starts on the perimeter. And, what happens is, they wear guys down and they make it hard. So by the time they get to the rim, life becomes even harder. And like I said, they don't have guys that maybe like get up and just swat shots. They make life really hard. And Nana has been so good at defending without fouling and impacting shots. And it just makes him such a unique, special player. Again, I'm curious to see who they have him guard, if he's going to be able to play a little bit more free safety. When he's out on the perimeter, you're not able to maybe get the best out of him if he spends a lot of time out there. So I'm super intrigued to see what they do with him. But yeah, it starts on the perimeter with the rim protection. And, I do a little game day video, and my one key stat I looked at is the Lobos they were top 5 and now they're 8th on that new KenPom stat that everybody loves, right? The 2-point average distance. And, what I talked about with that is, yeah, it's obviously that what that means is, you're getting close to the basket. But the other thing that comes with that is that means that you're probably more than likely, if you're getting to the basket, unless a guy's just an awful on-ball defender and just giving you it, but kind of there, like you're going to make 2 guys guard 1. And that means you're going to get a good shot after that. So it's not just that you're going to get a really nice high percentage 2-pointer in the paint. It's that your threes are probably going to be better looks. And I think that some of that stuff's tied in with the efficiency that New Mexico has shown a little bit, and, is the classic Erik Olin, right? Efficiency, right? That's kind of who he is and what he is. And I think when you tie those two things together, it's kind of my one thing I'm keeping an eye on. And it kind of goes both ways. Like GCU's good as well, not as good as New Mexico at getting to the rim. But between two really good defensive teams, like what is going to give there? It's hard to tell. Obviously, with New Mexico being home, a little bit better at getting to the rim, I think that's a point of concern for the Lopes and some of the lapses that they have shown. But I'm intrigued to see how that works, and not just if New Mexico can get to the rim, but also like, is that going to result in open threes? Because once you get guys chasing, it is not fun when you're one guy behind the whole time for, 15 seconds on a shot clock, and that's going to wear you down throughout the game. So I agree. It's something I'm keeping an eye on. Nana Owusu-Nane is kind of that middle linebacker, free safety, a ridiculous comparison, but that Draymond Green sort of do everything guy. It's blocks, it's steals, it's contesting shots without fouling, it's rebounds. I mean, he had a play, and Bryce talked about it in the presser, but he got an offensive rebound on my one side of the court, passed it out, and another guy shot it, and he just ended up on the other side of the court, sprinted, and just got it. Like, he's got an insane motor. He cannot be stopped. Again, the injury, he went to the bench and tried to go right back and check in. And Bryce had to be like, hey, we're going to look at this a little bit more and then maybe get you back in the game. But that's just how he rolls. So I think it'll be a really fascinating matchup, is how they're able to guard the Lobos defensively, just with how successful they've been at getting to the rim.
Nick.
Speaking with Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio. Brennan, talking defense. You talked on your podcast earlier today about how GCU may defend Jake Hall. You thought maybe speed instead of size. Hall, the Mountain West freshman of the week last week. How do you think GCU defends Jake Hall?
Man, and this is something I think we'll talk about later. Like I'm just looking at this stuff and like my mind is blown. And I know you guys are probably used to it now, but I'm like, This guy who's committed to him to UCSD, this 6'4" guard from Carlsbad, is now just coming into the Mountain West as a freshman and averaging 14 a game and doing it officially. I'm just like, my brain's blown. Like, he's a go-to guy, and obviously 3 of your top 4 scorers there are freshmen, and it's unbelievable. And I'll want to know your guys' input on that. But yeah, my other thought was I couldn't figure it out with him. I was like, what's going to really disrupt him? And I thought, I don't know. I couldn't get into it. I'm curious what you guys have seen. Maybe he's been successful, but you watch him play. I mean, he's plenty stout, but I thought maybe if you could try to overwhelm him. I didn't think length maybe would be a massive issue for him. And I thought maybe size and speed and just trying to like wear him down and bump him on screens and kind of do that senior veteran experience thing that they've got. They've got, Brian Moore Jr. who's I just call him a pit bull, right? He's a guard from New York, tough as nails, a guy who maybe offensively hasn't lived up to it, but defensively, it's just like, hey, man, you're going to have a long night. Like, I'm just going to be here. He's not big, but he's a pit bull and he's tough. They've got a few other options, but yeah, I couldn't figure it out. And again, when I just watch him and I look at the stats and I just like, my brain's broken. Like, this guy's coming into the Mountain West, and he's, again, the efficiency is what blows my mind, how well and how successful he's been able to do it. So, I mean, I'm curious what you guys think about those 3 guys and what's, the freshmen and what's made him. I know Tenet, a little bit of efficiency, would be nice there if you would improve that a little bit. But again, that 6-man off the bench, or, maybe other units, he's getting the ball in his hand. But I don't know. I kind of was watching it like, I don't know how you limit him. And my mind continued to be blown on how successful he's been kind of making that transition to, I mean, how good would he have been at UCSD? I mean, holy smokes, right?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I hear what you're saying, man. I think that's all fair. I think the teams that have been big and physical with Jake Hall have had the most success. If you look at some of his lowest point totals on the season, Boise State, he wasn't very good at all. Santa Clara, he did not shoot the ball well at home. New Mexico State, he did not shoot well. All those games, he's below double figures and hasn't shot a high percentage. I think the common theme in those games is teams are being physical with him and not letting him get anything easy. If you watch the Boise State game, he got a shot blocked twice. And so, GCU has those kinds of defenders that they can throw at him. Jaden Henley at 6'7", 28 steals on the season. I mean, I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup, man. You talked a little bit about Tenet. Coach Olin talked about that today at his pregame press conference, talking about he wants Uriah to shoot a little bit more efficiently from 2, wants to see him get to the free throw line a little bit more. Uriah comes from Prescott High School where he shot a lot of mid-range jumpers. And mid-range jumpers are not the best shot in Eric Olin's offense. He wants a 3 or a shot at the rim. That's pretty much it. Uriah can get those mid-range jumpers in transition. But, yeah, man, he's been best player off the bench, still averaging double figures. He's been solid. Brennan, talk to us a little bit about how GCU's played on the road, man. I mean, they went up and won at Boise. I feel like they've been pretty good on the road this year. This is going to be certainly their biggest road test. I think we can both agree on that. But
totally,
how have the Lopes played on the road?
Yeah, it did start with the St. Louis game, which, again, I know I brought it up a few times. I was on site for that one, so I went out for that. Obviously, St. Louis, the Robbie Avila swan song, need to see it in person. We know Shirts, the coach out there, he's good for, a clip or 2 or a comment or 2. And I just wanted to kind of see that one in person. And that one was very bad. But that was their first, like, true road test. They didn't have a lot of them in the non-con. And it did not go good. Like I said, they got kind of blown off the floor. You kind of look at a little bit of hindsight. It's early in the season. No guys returning. St. Louis had some guys returning. Tough game on the road. St. Louis, obviously, really good as well. We've kind of got a little bit of a sample size there to know like they're for real. They're probably going to be around an at-large team. But, that environment wasn't that crazy. Nice arena. Fans were there. There were some students, nothing like they'll face, I don't think, tomorrow night. The Wyoming game was really awesome. Like, that was really galvanizing for that group. They needed it. All the talk about the tough travel there. The flight got diverted. They had to go to Fort Collins and then take a bus. So they got the full experience going up there, right? The altitude. And they passed that with flying colors. They did a fantastic job. Again, up there, I don't think you're getting a crazy crowd. It looks like I was watching the game with friends. I was joking. It's definitely an arena made for bowl bull riding that happens to have a basketball court when they need it, right? You can definitely tell that because there's like this giant hallway, and my buddy was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I think that's probably where they bring the bulls in. I'm guessing it's just this massive hallway sitting there. You can see it in the background." And then, so, they passed that test. And then, you've got the Boise State game, which went great. Again, that felt like kind of an us against the world sort of game. Not a ton of fans there. And, I've tried to explain in my preview and everything I've talked about, like, this will be a different test. I've gone to the Mountain West tournament the last 2 years. Obviously, 2 years ago was just electrifying. The championship game, we knew someone within the program. Me and my buddies did. We were sitting right next to Eddie House, which was, if we could just do like a live stream of him during those games, that would have been just unbelievable. I mean, thousands of people would have watched. He was unbelievably entertaining in that run in Vegas. But you understand the legacy fans and how much these fans care, and also how much they understand the rhythms of the game as well. They know the momentum times to really stand up and go crazy when they need to stop. And it's just different. And we talked a little bit before the season, like, what's it going to take for GCU as a program to grow? It's like, it's that, like, the legacy fans, the alumni, and everybody, the students are obviously heavily invested in it, but the other fans, like, it's got to grow and be a lot better. I think they have to, they've got to get some people more bought in that understand the game and people that really care about it. And that comes with time. And I think they'll get there, but it'll be unlike a test I think they've faced so far on the road. It's been tough in different ways, I think, each game, but this one is kind of presenting a different challenge where you got a really good basketball team, a little bit of altitude, your classic Mountain West game, but also just a really good fan base that, like I said, I've experienced in person, and it is, it's intoxicating is the word I use. You got the flags, you got everything going on there. So, I don't know are we getting a special uniform tomorrow? Are we getting the teals potentially? How often do they break those out? I don't know what we're getting.
That's not coming tomorrow, man. It's going to be a cherry out tomorrow. So lots of red.
We like that. Okay.
Yeah,
That'll be a good little jersey matchup. We like that.
You guys in purple? Lavender? You guys went lavender
they did. Game, right? They debuted some lavenders at home on Saturday, which were great. I thought they looked good. I think the purple on the lavender might be something they could improve on in future years. I think that, maybe didn't look great, but overall the jerseys were awesome. I thought it looked really good. Love the alternates and kind of just doing different stuff. So we love that. But yeah, they should be road purples, I think, or no, they usually do purple at home. So it should be whites. Yeah, they'll be road whites. So that'll be a fantastic little jersey matchup. So we just need our friends at the Mountain West Network. We're not going to say anything too mean, but the last two games, they have botched the stream. So we're going to hope that they come through and take care of business tomorrow night. They're ready to rock. Our friends over there, I call them our friends, excited. I know they'll be all over it. So,
well, I know that UNM has Retro Night coming up. I think like in a week or 2 weeks, and I think it's going to pay some kind of tribute to the 90s Lobos. So those are the Lobos that Nick and I grew up on, the Charles Spider Smith days, like the old. I'm kind of hoping they're going to come out with some kind of retro jersey that pays a tribute to those guys and kind of that era of Lobo basketball. And I think that's kind of the Lobo basketball era that kind of kicked off this craze, right? So I do want to circle back though. We talked about just kind of personnel and rounding out the roster, overall depth. A guy that you really haven't mentioned tonight, and a guy that kind of came in with some accolades at a lesser conference and maybe kind of a lower competition level, in Brian Moore, right? He was considered the top mid-major player in the country. He averaged about 18, 19 points at Norfolk State, and now he's not doing a whole lot of that. I think he's averaging right around 6 or 7 points per game. I think he is still starting, but I mean, was the expectation just set too high? I think you can kind of factor in the level of play, physicality, competition. But I mean, what is your take on him there? Does he still kind of have a ceiling to get to?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it has been weird. So the expectations were pretty high. I'm not gonna lie. I was watching the film. I think the thing I was most excited with him when I watched some of his stuff at Norfolk, and he actually played at GCU Arena his last year at Norfolk. The thing that I was most excited with him was his ability to kind of, the Lopes struggled in transition last year. They didn't get a ton of easy offense. And the hope was this is a guy, when you watch the film, like he loves to get out and run, and he kind of goes at his own pace. He can shoot threes, mostly catch and shoot, not necessarily off the dribble, but he's going to maybe bring some easy offense. That was the hope. And whether it's him or getting other guys involved, especially in transition, that was the hope. Hasn't quite been there. He's 8, 2.5 right now. And, it's not efficient. It's 43, 33, and 65 for his splits. Looking at it now, he does the other things. And I know it sounds dumb and cliche. And he's mentioned so many times, like, this is his final year. He just wants to win. Him and Nana Wusuwanane, they're both those guys kind of final year. Like, we came here because we want to win. And, if that means I'm not going to be mid-major player of the year anymore, then so be it. I think the play has been disappointing on the offensive end, though, for sure. We'll see if he's able to get a little bit of, if he can even just make some threes, I think he'd be super additive out there. He is a great defender. He's tough. He's a bulldog. He's going to stick his nose in. You can rely on that night to night. That is kind of, without a doubt. But offensively, it has been a little bit of a struggle. I'll be honest. Like I was watching the last few games. The jumper looks a little different than it did at Norfolk. I don't know if that's, maybe just my eyes maybe trying to convince me of something. I don't know. The jumper does look a little bit different. So again, I don't know what you kind of draw from that, but offensively, it has not been good. I think we did definitely have higher expectations. I think we thought he's a guy who'd make some threes at Norfolk. Wasn't a high volume 3-point shooter, but he did make them efficiently. And then the other thing was he did get out and run in transition. We haven't seen a ton of that yet. So maybe he does provide a little bit of a spark here at times, but yeah, it's been the backcourt. It's been a little bit of kind of like, who's kind of stepping up. Like Dusty didn't play great to start the season. He was kind of starting. So he pulls back. Makai goes into the starting lineup. Okay. He's back. Oh, Caleb Shaw now is playing. He's making threes. So we're going to start him. Obviously Henley. And so it's been a little bit of mixing and matching. And right now it seems like Brian Moore Jr., they're starting him and playing him alongside Henley. I don't know if maybe those two have something, that really works that they like there, but Makai's obviously playing a lot as well. And then kind of complementing that. So again, I think you're spot on. Like, I don't know if disappointing is a word. That might sound a little dramatic. Cause I do think, he hasn't been, the play maybe hasn't been good from like a stats perspective, but he is tough and he's a fighter and he's worked his butt off out there. It's just offensively, it maybe hasn't lived up to the bill. So we'll see if that can change, but yeah, this would be a great game for him. Like, he's a veteran, tough kid. Like I said, from New York, those New York guards are as tough as it gets. So this is kind of the sort of the game where he shouldn't be overwhelmed. He's been, everywhere. They played Florida in the tournament last year, round 1, which is insane to think about. So no game should be too big for him. We'll see. Maybe Tuesday he can, get a few jumpers to fall, maybe get out and transition a little bit, and maybe affect some of those younger guys, right? Maybe he spends some time on J. Call. Maybe he says, you're right, Tanet, like, sorry, man, but you are a true freshman. Like, I'm experienced. This is a year 5 sort of thing. Like, I'm a bulldog. I'm going to get in your hair and I'll guard you tough. So we'll see. Hopefully he can affect the game tomorrow night, though.
Brennan, I just had kind of one more, man. I wanted to know
Please.
kind of how GCU's experience with the point guard position has been. Having Jaden Henley run the 1 a lot of the time, Makai Williams off the bench. Doesn't seem like they really have a true point guard, which you don't really need in college basketball these days. When I looked at their kind of game stats, it seemed like there were at least 5 games or so where they had around 15 turnovers. Playing in the pit, man, when the Lobos get downhill and get the crowd behind them, you talked about the flows of the game. I mean, GCU is going to experience that at some point tomorrow, likely. How do you think they respond to that?
Yeah, it's tough. The ball handling has been interesting because I think that's kind of one of the big question marks as, all these new guys come in and you guys have had to deal with it too, right? Like, these guys are feeling each other out, your turn, my turn sort of stuff going on there. Like, how does this all work? And you're right. There's not a true, like, old school point guard. Maybe it's something I think for next year they maybe think about. And it doesn't have to be a starter, right? But maybe it's a guy who can come in and is more of a traditional point guard for 18 to 20 minutes a game. But yeah, Henley at times, I wouldn't say Henley's out there and the first thing he's thinking is, how can I create a shot for somebody else, right? For the most part, he's a really gifted kind of isolation, backdoor cut, he's just a gifted scorer, and that's who he is. And it is tough because at times he's doing some of the primary ball handling. So it really has been by committee. I mean, we've seen Dusty Stromer have a few games with 5 assists. Nana, again, that name I know keeps coming up, but he's had multiple games, 5, 6 assists where, they're running some offense through him as kind of that point forward. Mackay, like you said, has been involved as well. A little bit of Brian Moore Jr., but yeah, that's probably been the one thing that's been a little bit of an Achilles heel. When you look at a game like St. Louis, they just, you got 5 minutes into that game, you're just like, oh no, like they don't have any control of this game. They don't know who's going to have the ball in their hands. Like this thing's over. I mean, they're just you're not coming back from that. The Youngstown State game, that was a theme as well. They could not stop the bleeding, and when you're at home and you're playing an inferior team like Youngstown State, you just got to kind of hold serve. And eventually you're going to make that run when you're the home team and you're the better team. Like it's just, kill some of those runs that they've got. And, eventually, as time goes on, you're going to get yourself back in the game. It never happened. And so I think you're spot on there, Nick. It has been a problem. The turnovers, it is spotty. And I think the weird thing with them is they'll go, 8 minutes without one. And you're like, oh, wow, look at that. They haven't turned the ball over in a while. And then in the next 4 minutes, they'll turn it over 5 times, like 5 straight possessions. It's like, whoa. And so it's another thing that's been very touch and go. And I think because of that, I think they have an idea kind of, in these different lineups and they're feeling them out, but I still am unsure where they want to go at the end of the game. Like if they're in, the game tomorrow night, Lobos are up 2, you got 2 minutes left. Like I don't know. And again, I've watched them all season. I don't know where they'd want to go or whose hands they would want the ball in. And I think we're figuring that out on the fly. So I think it's definitely been, a problem, but there's been games where you've seen maybe the better side of it. Like someone's not dominating the ball and it's whipping around and everyone's involved and Nana's involved and FA's involved and, the ball whips around. So there are some pros to it, I think, as well, that you're not relying on one guy to get everything going. But at times they've sure needed one guy to just grab the ball and say, hey, let's get this thing rolling here and kind of initiate some stuff for sure. They've definitely needed that.
Yeah, Erik.
Yeah. Brennan, again, man, thanks for coming on the Pit Press live tonight to join us to preview the game. But maybe it's a moot point by now, but you did bring up kind of maybe what the X factor might be, or just Jake Hall's game and how do they nullify that. I think one player that we haven't talked about on this show particularly, I know they talked about it with Kenny Thomas on the show last night, but I think a lot of this game tomorrow is going to be determined on how well Albury plays and his ability to penetrate and get into the lane, because that's what GCU has been really effective at, is protecting the paint and kind of limiting how many players actually penetrate and apply pressure to the rim. That's what Albury's game is, and I think guys on the perimeter like Jake Hall, like Tannett, like Luke Hopp, like Tajavis Miller, those guys are benefiting from that because they're getting the kickouts. They're knocking down the shots. Sure, give them credit for that, but those opportunities wouldn't happen if Albury's not able to get into the lane or he's not able to maneuver and just continue to apply pressure to the rim. And I think that's early in the season, he was almost pressing. He was like forceful at sometimes, and he just seemed a little kind of too sped up and a little out of control. But now we're starting to see, okay, like this is very methodical in how they're approaching it. So I would look for that tomorrow too, is like, okay, is there going to be a really good on-ball defender to limit Albury? Are they going to be able to face guard him and keep him out of the lane? Because if he gets in the lane, he's really good about getting to the rim, right, and finishing around the basket. If not, he's also whipping it around. He's kicking out and finding guys like Jake Hall, and that's when those guys start to really fill it up. Because outside of that, Jake Hall is not going to be the typical blow by guy, beat you on the first step, take you back you down, beat
not
you
giving him the ball
1-on-1.
25 feet from the basket and say, get us a shot, and everyone's going to stand around. Yeah,
no, exactly. So it's all attributed to guys playing well together, and I think they have good chemistry, and I think Albury has been exceptional at getting into the lane and distributing to some of the guys around the perimeter. So just be on the lookout for that. But Nick, do you have any final thoughts for Brennan, or Brennan, do you have any questions for us about UNM? Because I know that you have some of your followers tuning in. We're right up about 50 minutes, coming close into an hour, but we've covered a lot, man. So really appreciate you jumping on with us.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. I think my one big question is kind of going back to the stuff we talked about earlier. I'd be curious both of your guys' answers. Like, maybe go back to your preseason expectations and then look at, is there an element of surprise, especially when you consider the youth on this team? Obviously, you got yourself very familiar with Olin, who was quite the darling last year, right? Those teams were such a treat to watch. Have you been surprised at, when you consider the youth, how efficient this team has been? Obviously, you'd take back the New Mexico State game probably if you could, right? Like that one's kind of sitting there staring at you like, dang, if we could have that one would go a long ways if you had that. But outside of that, it seems like this team has kind of come together pretty quickly with a new staff as well. So can you just talk about, I guess, maybe how impressed you've been and how you kind of grade them out with when you consider the youth and how well, Erik Olin's been able to kind of hit the ground running and have success?
Yeah,
Nick,
man.
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, for sure. I think for a lot of Lobo fans didn't know what to expect. Brand new coaching staff, brand new roster. And obviously Erik Olin had a lot of success at UCSD. I don't know if Lobo fans expected us to be where we're at right now. The beginning of the season was a little rocky. Lobo fans weren't very happy with the exhibition games at Washington State or Northern Arizona. And, it wasn't a finished product, man, by any means. It took a while. We didn't shoot the ball well at all the first 3 games of the season. If you look at our 3-point shooting percentage, it was super low, right around 30%. And we've had some clunkers since. Boise State, 3 of 25. But, this team has gradually gotten better. I think the turning point in the season for UNM was when they lost to Nebraska. The very next day, they beat Mississippi State. And I think just by and large, outside of that Boise State game, I mean, that's their only loss since then. And that was 10 days after the break. And I heard Bryce Drew talk about this too. Bryce Drew was like,
brutal.
we didn't hit anybody for 10 days, so we were just kind of in a funk. But outside of that Boise State game, this team has just grown, man. And I think they're a pretty well-oiled machine. They played bad in some games. FGCU at home, they looked really, really bad. That was after the road trip to VCU. They still won that game. But, they haven't just come out and stunk it up. So I expect them to be ready to play tomorrow. I think it's going to be a good matchup, man. Erik.
Yeah, to answer your question, Brennan, I think most of it, I mean, kind of what you see has been such a big surprise. One, I think just the conversation about the impact the freshmen have been able to have, especially in today's like college landscape where you have 6-year and 7th years transfers just kind of bouncing around, and you have a starting lineup of like 23 and 24-year-olds, and then here you go with UNM, you have 3 of their top scorers are 2 of them are 18, but Bouillon is 23. That's the one exception. But I think another pleasant surprise too was just Bouillon's impact immediately. I think coming in, Olin,
which I remember you guys were monitoring that when we talked preseason. Like you were just keeping an eye because you guys have another international player, I think, as well on the roster. And you guys said, we've heard some things. We need to see if it plays, but it sounds like these guys might be the real deal.
Yeah, Tomeo Pons hasn't seen too many minutes. He's played sparing minutes here and there, like 2 or 3 at the end of games, just meaningless minutes, really, essentially. But yeah, Bouillon coming in, we didn't know a whole lot about him. There wasn't a whole lot of film. We just knew that he was playing professionally overseas and didn't come in with like this notoriety or anything. So I think that has probably been the biggest surprise, and like how impactful and powerful. I mean, he is kind of a grown man out there, and not only affecting the boards, but he's running the break in some instances too. He's pulling down rebounds and starting the fast break. So he just really experienced, and I think kind of guys are thriving off of that. But this freshman class is unique in a lot of ways, but it's been fun and exciting to watch and kind of be a part of, because we are a part of the media and we get to see things from a different angle and share it with all you guys here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love a good team, especially you talked about just kind of where college basketball's at now, right? Who's greater than the sum of its parts, or whatever that saying is. And that's not saying this team, this Lobos team is not talented. I want to be super clear that I don't need Lobos fans coming after me here. But I think I've just been really impressed with the work that, Olin's been able to do when you look at these guys. Again, 2 guys who were committed to him at UCSD again, who's really asserted itself as a great mid-major program, but the Mountain West we know is just a different beast, and how well that's been able to translate. And just, the talent evaluation, it seems like, is really high over there. And so I'm excited to see this GCU team with a ton of talent and a mid-major player of the year and a guy, Nana at Brown that was getting, looks, was committed to SMU, and all this kind of talent oozing, and Dusty Stromer, who blew up, right? His last year in high school, became super popular, was at Gonzaga. And then you kind of contrast that with this New Mexico team that, is kind of greater than the sum of its parts. I think makes for a really good battle, and they have a lot of stats that are eerily similar. And they're, at the same time, though, they're kind of super different teams. So we're going to get all our answers, though, tomorrow night. And then, if we don't get all our answers tomorrow night, we're going to get them when the Lobos come back to GC Arena, which will make it really fun. So excited to see excited to see it all play out.
Nick, any final thoughts?
No, man, just want to really thank Brennan Williams for joining us of Go Lopes Radio. Brennan, you do a great job covering GCU hoops and just really the Mountain West, man. I mean, you jumped on with Steve Ivey the other day, put out great content. Lobo fans, give him a follow. Brennan Williams at Go Lopes Radio. Thanks again, Brennan.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I want to say I've had some Lobo fans on the page commenting, fantastic. And I know we talked preseason, like we're pretty excited. We'll see if there's any kind of negative juice, right? We know there's some beef out there. We got Utah State and Boise State, and then now GCU's wrapped into it. All sorts of stuff's going on. The GCU New Mexico stuff's been very cordial, a very much like tip of the cap, respect the game. So I love what we got going on here. Maybe we'll get a little juice tomorrow night, though. Maybe that's what we need, is for them to get out on the court. But I think this is going to be a really exciting, duo of games each year, home and home, as the years go by. So excited to see kind of iteration 1 in the Mountain West tomorrow night. So I'm amped, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Brennan. And I think a lot of us share the same sentiment here at Lobo Nation with kind of the divulgence of the Mountain West kind of exploding, and what's left over of the Mountain West, and welcoming a program like GCU has been a positive that have come out of that. So with that final thought for your evening, I thank you everybody who tuned in to watch the Pit Press Live. Follow the channel if you haven't already. Go out and check Brennan Williams' stuff. His podcast is available on YouTube. I think you're also on Spotify.
Yep.
And check out your it's not a website, but it is Substack that you write.
Substack,
you recap preview games. So check that out. We can link that below in the YouTube description, so you guys can easily find that. But for Erik, Moulton, Nick Nunez, and Brennan Williams, you have been watching the Pit Press Live.